The Renault 5 Turbo, or the R5 Turbo as it's sometimes called, is of course a returning face. When it comes to Gran Turismo, we've had the road version in a bunch of different games, we've had the rally version, the Maxi Turbo if you will, in a bunch of games as well, and technically we are due to get that sometime as a return. We don't know if that's going to be in GT7 or could well be the next game. At this point we'll have to wait and see. In the case of the road going version, which of course we have here, it's a roughly 150 or so grand car in used form, so it ain't cheap by hot hatch standards. But of course, you have to look past the fact that it's a hot hatch, and more so to the fact that it's a homologation special from one of the most iconic eras of rallying ever. So on that perspective, it makes a bit more sense. Stuff like a Delta, a Quattro, even from the touring car world, a Sierra RS500, certainly a Mercedes 190e, that's pretty much the holy grail of that territory, and various others too, they've all skyrocketed in price. And in the case of this one, well, it almost seems humorous how modest the spec is by today's standards. In fact, if you compare it to something as cheap on the other end of the spectrum as my own car, which I often reference, my little daily runabout, the Daihatsu Rally, also from the sphere of off-road racing of course, as the name implies, this isn't that much different in the grand scheme of things. It is, but it kind of isn't given the massive gulf in price that one of these would set you back versus mine. And of course I'm not going to say that mine is anywhere near as iconic or deserves to be, but just consider this for a second. This car's 150 grand. You're probably going to be paying a pretty ridiculous amount of money in real life as well. In comparison, I paid 1900 quid, £1,900 for my Daihatsu, and that's fairly hefty because it was in basically mint condition and one of only 17 left on the road. When you look at the spec though, the Renault weighs 970 kilos, my Daihatsu weighs 850, the Renault has 160 horsepower or 159, the Daihatsu's 110, so yes, it's a difference, but that's not a crazy difference. And even in terms of performance, well, of course the Renault 5, although not slow, not having all-wheel drive and having significantly less power than even one of its best rivals, the Peugeot 205 T16 in road form, which of course in itself is kind of weird how you have the rally version of the Peugeot but not the road car, and then we have the road version of the Renault but not the rally car. In terms of its ability, well, it's only 410 points to begin with, so it's not like it really has that much to prove, but ironically it simultaneously does, and that's what I'm talking about, because although these days you could say, well, sure, times have moved on, hot hatches have gotten quicker, well, even back then this was one of the least powerful of this kind of sphere, and even though it's a legend for a reason, well, like I said, the Peugeot 205 is already up around 200 plus horses, the Quattro, the Delta, they were all beyond that, more like 220, meanwhile this has 160. It has a weight advantage over some, but even then, 970 kilos, well, that's nearly a ton anyway, so it's not that much of an advantage. In terms of what you can do to it in the game, well, you can tune up the engine a decent amount. It's not going to be crazy powerful, but you can go well beyond 200, and if you're curious, the spec that I'm using here, as you can see, is on comfort softs, so still pretty realistic. I've dropped the weight to more like 800 kilos instead of just under 1,000, and I've kept the power to just under 200. So believe it or not, it's actually still under a 500 point car, and even though, spoiler alert, I don't win the race, it does come second against the highest level of difficulty on Sophie, so it definitely has tons of potential on road, and I would argue, ironically, for a rally-based car, it's actually on road where it does its best work. In terms of motor swaps though, you can actually put the S15 Sylvia motor into it, which I don't recall what that would have been in reference to. I'm sure somebody's pointed it out before, but I don't recall. So you can get plenty more horsepower if you swap it for that motor, but even then it's never going to be like Pikes Peak monster territory. That being said, I feel like it's almost sacrilegious to waste a little icon like this by putting a more powerful engine in there. You could, but at that point you may as well just wait for the rally version, I guess. It's one of those cars where I really love the idea of the Renault 5, but I can't say I find myself using it all that often compared to many of its rivals, many of its peers from the touring car world, the rally world. A lot of them really are useful. The Delta, the Quattro, they are still really good cars to this day. And of course in the touring car sphere, you tune up an E30 M3, a 190e or a Sierra RS500, well again, they're really good track day monsters when you apply the right tuning, keep it to the right point level, and although they're expensive, you don't really mind paying that because they are legendary. In the case of the Renault, it doesn't quite have that same level of usefulness, at least to me. Maybe it is just me though. I would be curious to know if this is perhaps one of your go-to cars. I could see it being perhaps the case for some people, maybe if you race in certain restricted power events, not just in Gran Turismo or in general, or maybe if you do prefer to go under 500 points or even closer to 400 points. That is really where this car comes into its own in comparison to those rivals, because being light, being compact, having rear-wheel drive instead of four-wheel drive does have some advantages. In terms of its handling, its road holding, it's a bit heavier than I would personally like, especially under heavy braking. It kind of just wants to carry on going straight. It's hard to know how much of that is because of the physics changes of the game again, which are definitely less forgiving and heavy braking. But yeah, it's a bit of a mixed bag for me. At the end of the day, 150 grand for a car with 160 horsepower is fairly hefty, icon or not, but it is a legend for a reason, and that's it for my thoughts. So of course, stick around for more GT7 reviews in future, and for now, thanks for watching.